My name is Sandra Walker Howell, and I was born in Hampton, Virginia on December 19th, 1939. I'm now 82 years old.
Very nice. If you could tell us a little bit about your family, pardon me, maybe tell us about your grandparents and maybe their grandparents, where they were from.
Okay. We don't have much history. I don't have very much history to go back because really my grandparents, and then a lot of people around my age, grandparents didn't talk about where they were from, what would happen, you know. They kind of kept it from the younger ones in the family. So I really can only go back to grandparents.
That's fine.
And I can't go any further back than that. My grandparents were a very important part of my life. I lived in Hampton, and my grandparents were in Newport News, which was a neighboring city. And so we visit my grandparents very often.
Hampton where?
Hampton, Virginia.
Okay.
And that's near Norfolk on the eastern part of Virginia. So my grandparents, we're like, my grandmother didn't work. My grandfather worked at the shipyard as a janitor. And we would go up, in the summer we'd spend a lot of time, not overnight because we were in neighboring cities, but just for the day, because my grandmother, after her children were grown, she began to raise other grandchildren. So there wasn't in the house, it wasn't a room in the house for my brother and I had a brother, and I had to stay overnight. So we would just like go for the day and would stay, you know, all day in the summer except school time. After school, we would go up and stay with my grandmother. We had a lot of time, a good time there. She did a lot of cooking. She was, you know, housewife. And when my grandfather got home from shipyard, he had a garden, and you know, he'd work in the garden. And so my grandparents, they didn't have a car. They lived a very simple life. We always had plenty of food. We had a roof over our head and clothes on our back. My father always said they were the three most important. Don't worry about anything else. You had those three things, you're good to go. So my grandparents, they were on my mother's side. My grandparents on my father's side died when I was young. Well, at least my dad was 12 when his mother passed. She was domestic. She worked in a home, and white people's home, and she would carry my father every day. My father always talked about his life of growing up in a white person's home. Some people I know think that it was the worst thing in the world. My dad thought it was just, he had a wonderful experience working. I mean, he was working when his mother was 12. When his mother died, they wanted to keep him on there, although he didn't do a lot of work. He lived in the loft, which was on the 3rd level, and he did gardening work and all, and finished his elementary and high school living with them because his father was a domestic in a hotel, and they had other children. So it was good that, you know, he stayed with the white family, and they sent him to college when he finished high school. They paid his money. He went to Hampton University in Hampton, Virginia, and he took a 4-year degree in carpentry. So after finishing Hampton, he went to North Carolina to teach for a short time, and then after North Carolina teaching there for a short time, he didn't kind of like the atmosphere there. He thought it was so much more segregated than living in Virginia. So, and he was teaching, and they didn't give supplies to the black schools that they needed for them to do carpentry. So my dad only stayed there on a couple of years, and then he came back to Virginia and went to work on Hampton University campus, helping to build some of the dormitories there on the campus. And from there, of course, he got married after he came back from North Carolina, I think. And when he got married, he moved, the white family bought land for him down in the area of Hampton. It's called Phoebus. Phoebus used to be an independent town before it connected with Hampton. And so when I say Phoebus, I'm also talking about Hampton. So my dad was given that land, and of course he was a carpenter, so he began to build a house on that land. So the land was cleared, countrywide.
And who gave him the land?
The white family
Okay.
that he grew
Yes.
up, and they were like grandparents. I knew them, because my grandfather, although he took care of the other children, he died when I was 10. So I did have some memory of him, but not a lot of memory of just who he was. So the white family was the family that my dad would take me down once a week or so to visit with him. They weren't too far from us, and we went to visit they were called the Wilsons. And they owned, they had a bank there, and they had a feed store. They were very wealthy, they had a big house and big yard and so forth. They were, and they treated my dad, never said they mistreated him. Although it was very, segregated, but he was never mistreated by them. He couldn't eat with them, and there are certain things he was not allowed to do with the family. But, that got him started. And then afterwards, after I was born, and I have a younger brother, because he was determined that we should go to college. My mom went to just a beauty school. Her parents had 4 children, and there were 3 girls and 1 boy, so they only believed in sending the boy to school, to college.
And
The girls didn't go to college.
I see. And where did she grow up?
She grew up in Newport News. My mom,
Yeah.
she grew up in Newport News, and my dad grew up in an area of Hampton called Phoebus.
Yes.
And they met because my dad, when he was in school, one of his friends was going with his sister, my mom's sister, and they went up to the house, and that's how he met my mom, and they, married.
And your mother's side of the family was from Virginia?
Yeah, from Newport News, Virginia,
Virginia.
my mom's. So I was connected with my mom's side of the family, because that's who we did everything with, because my dad's family was really kind of, after his mother died when he was 12, the family went different places. Some of the other children, there were 6 children, they went different homes and so forth to live. So and then his father died when I was 10. So I didn't know very much about their side of family and really interacting with him and all. But with my mom's family, very close to my first cousins and all of those persons.
And so your parents met and married,
Yes,
and then where did they live at this time?
they lived in Phoebus, which
They
is
were
Hampton.
Still in Phoebus.
Yeah,
So you grew up in Phoebus,
that's where I grew up.
you and your brother.
Yes.
What was that like? Your childhood memories?
That area, it was about family mostly. You go to school in the morning, and you come home, and you interact with your family and your neighbors, we had an interesting neighborhood, because at that time we had whites living over here and blacks over here. So when I get home from school, I play with white children, basically. They come over because my dad had built a playhouse. Most children didn't have it. By him being a carpenter, he had built a playhouse. So all the kids liked to come to our house because they could play in the playhouse. So the white children came too, although we went to different schools. We didn't have swimming pools. The white playgrounds, there were 2 playgrounds, a white playground and a black playground. The white playground had a swimming pool, baseball court. We had more or less a sand lot, We made it into a playground, really. It was a little one. And so it was very, very, very different.
But the white children could come and play in your playground, but could you go to their playground?
No, we could not go to that playground at all. They could come, but I don't remember or know of any white children that came to the playground. They came to my
But
house.
they came to your home.
They come to my house, to my home, and play with us, and we
Right.
have the best time playing
Go to their
family.
homes?
Yeah, I could go to their homes. Yeah. But they spend most of the time at my house. Yeah, because we had
Because
the
you
house.
had the
Nicest
apartment
place.
and the-
My dad had built a nice home for us. We were one of the first homes that had 2 bathrooms. A lot of people didn't even have one. They had outdoor toilets at that time, they had the outhouse.
I see.
And then the people who did have in, they only had one bedroom, but we had 2 full bathrooms, and we also had 4 bedrooms. So we were like one of the big houses in that area, and one of the not really prestigious families, because my mother hadn't finished college. You know, she'd gone to beauty school. My dad had finished Hampton, but he never really made any money. So it was depending on one's salary. But like I told you, the white families did give him the land, and they gave him money to help build the house.
Nice. Very good. And then, so you went through high school there? Or
Yeah, I
was
went all the way through my school
and
days,
was that all segregated?
all segregated. We didn't really have a school in Phoebus, Virginia, which was his own city at that time. We had to go to Hampton University. They had a school that they had rented to the city of Hampton. So I had to go from Phoebus to Hampton to go to the school on the campus in the building that Hampton University had rented
I see.
to the school system. So that was
So segregated schools through high school.
all the way through, yeah, all the way. No, we didn't have a junior high, but we only had elementary and high school. The white schools had junior high, but the black schools did not. And then after I left there, I went to Petersburg in Virginia, University, what's called Virginia State College, segregated. And I went there, and I was there for 3 years, and I transferred. Well, at that time, Norfolk State now used to be Virginia State. It was like the same school, like the Virginia system, Maryland systems have several schools. So I transferred, so I ended up finishing my schooling in Norfolk, Virginia, at Virginia State College in Norfolk.
By schooling, you mean what years?
College.
Okay, but what happened? So
I went 3 years at Virginia, in Petersburg and 1 year in Norfolk,
Okay.
the same school.
But before that, if I can just make sure I understand. So you said, so there was elementary school, junior high?
No junior high.
That's what I was wondering.
Elementary
No
to high school. I went from elementary school,
to high
the
school.
7th grade, to high school.
But the white children had junior high.
Yes.
So in your neighborhood, there was elementary, and then you jumped up to high school.
Yeah.
And this was the one that was at Hampton.
Yeah. Yeah, both of them were.
Both of them were. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And then
I
they
see.
finally built a school in Phoebus, which was for black elementary children,
Okay.
not a high school, elementary school. And so I did transfer at I think I was in 3rd grade when I transferred to the new school that they built, the elementary school. And I stayed there till I was in the 7th grade. Elementary school went from, we didn't have kindergarten, but elementary school went from 1st grade to 7th grade. And then 7th grade, when you started 8th grade, you went to high school. And you went there till 12th grade.
Okay, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
And so then you went to college.
Yeah, then I went to college,
And
all segregated.
what did you study?
Elementary ed. I was always interested in kids, and like I say that growing up, we grew up in church, and so I used to teach Sunday school, and I used to teach vacation Bible school. So I did a lot of, they used the teenagers, the higher teenagers, to teach the little ones, because they didn't always have enough adults to do that, because they were working, during the summer. So with the younger children, the older children, they would use the adults, but for the younger children, they use teenagers. I was, in high school. I was teaching while I was in high school.
Can you describe your church? What
My
was it-
church-
What was church like?
Church was a Baptist church. It was all African American church. My mother, when she married my father, she was in a Baptist church in Newport News, and then when they moved down to Phoebus, she joined the church there, and that's where I did all of my background was at that church. It was called Zion Baptist Church. And I stayed there until I moved to Washington in 1963.
But what does that mean? You did your backgrounds.
Did I do what now?
What was it you were saying in church?
I did a lot of things with my church.
Which so you taught the children's
Children,
classes.
yeah.
What else?
I had usher board, kids that ushered in church,
Okay.
and I just did a lot of things in organizations, sang in the choir, the youth choir, and
Yes.
All those things
So
you do in
was
church.
a huge mainstay of the community.
The church was a real big part of the community. Everybody who lived there knew everybody, well, through the church too. Almost everybody belonged to the same. I think it was a couple other denominations, but it was just basically one church. That was the largest church there.
And what else? So, for example, what would if your family needed to get attention at a health clinic, or a doctor, or a hospital?
Health clinic. We had no health. We didn't have a health clinic.
So could you?
We didn't get sick. As a kid, our kid, when I got to be a teenager, I think I went to the doctor once because it was a black doctor. At that time, blacks went to the black doctors. Yeah.
Sure. So there was a black doctor in your community?
Yes, there was. But blacks could go to white doctors. There were few. They went to white doctors.
And what else? So church was a very important institution in the community.
Yes.
I'm assuming school was.
Yes, school was.
Was there?
And that was the playground in the summer.
In the playground. Okay.
Because they did hire, the city had, one person to run the playground. And that person ran the playground was a phys ed teacher during the winter in my high school. And during the summer, that was her summer job to run the playground. So she was the only one that kind of ran it. Some of the she had some older kids that would help her. But she basically ran that playground, which was sad. We used to go by and watch ride by the white playground. They'd have swimming pool out there swimming, they were baseball at night with the lights up, and they were playing baseball. We didn't have any lights on our playground at all. So when it got dark, that was it for the playground. Plus, it was right beside a railroad track. The trains, we'd see the trains that came back and forth from north. Really, Phoebus was the end of the line, because then you had the, Chesapeake Bay. We were right on the water.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Yes.
we were right on the water, right there. And
yes,
go ahead.
yes, go ahead.
I was just going to say we were right on the water, so we did fishing and crabbing and
very
that kind of
nice.
stuff. Yeah, we enjoyed that.
So then, when you went to college, you studied
Elementary.
You wanted to teach elementary education, and then you graduated.
Yes,
And then what happened?
I got married as soon as I graduated,
Okay.
and then I had a child soon after that, like 10 months, and we moved to Washington because my husband was from Virginia also. And
So
he
you
found it
moved
better.
to
We moved to
Washington,
Washington, D.C., and I had my second child here. I was in Arlington then. I lived in Washington. I lived in
What brought you
Arlington.
to DC?
Washington, D.C., he got a job here.
Okay.
He got a job and was like, okay. I had a job. I had gotten a job as soon as I finished college. And then we got married. And then he got a job. He applied. His job brought him to Washington. So I gave up my job and moved this way.
What was your job?
Teaching. I was teaching down there in a segregated school.
Also
elementary, yeah.
In your
In the
In which
not in Hampton.
in Hampton.
In
as well.
Hampton,
Okay,
yeah, in
I
Hampton.
see.
So I taught down there half a year, almost a whole year.
Okay. Okay. So then he got a job in Washington
Yeah.
D.C. and you moved up here.
Yeah, he wanted me to come to Washington, so we came to
And
Washington.
what was it like to move to Washington at that time?
Interesting, because at my home, although we were segregated, we were integrated to a certain extent. Like the kids,
Yes.
white, they would come over and play. Oh, we go to the theater together. I forgot about that. But we couldn't sit together. We'd walk from our neighborhood downtown to the theater. We did a lot of walking. So we walked to the theater, and we got to the theater, we had to go upstairs because the blacks slept, would go to the
Separate
theater.
entrances. You
Separate-
go-
Same entrance.
Same
'cause
entrance, okay.
But then it separated.
Yeah.
We had to go up and then down. So we said, okay, after the show, at that time you could keep watching the movies go on and on and on. But we always made it a point to say, okay, we're going to only watch, one time and come out. And then we'd meet and walk home together.
Nice.
So we went to the movie maybe every week or every other week or something like that. We went
Was it on the
often.
weekend?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we went to the movie quite often with
Nice.
our white friends.
And then, so in Washington, D.C., you said it was very different
It
because
was
it wasn't integrated,
no.
as integrated.
When I came here, I was living down H Street, Benning Heights, and so I did go. I got a job after my baby teaching,
Teaching.
and I took the bus. I rode the bus because we only had one car, and it was easy. It was easy for me to. I don't think I got my license by that time, and it was interesting because I'd never seen so many black people in my life. It was like black people all over, everywhere, and I was like, oh, okay. Down in Hampton, in that area, we were not the. It was like
Yes.
30-some% maybe to such and such a thing. Another interesting experience was high school. We didn't have a school bus. We had to take the city bus to and from school, or either walk. Most of the time we walked. If the weather wasn't bad, whatever, I walked to school basically every day. That was about 2 miles, 3 miles maybe, 2 or 3 miles a day. I walked to and from school. All the children in my neighborhood did that. There were other kids. Well, all the black children in Hampton went to one school. We had one
Right.
school. We had Phoenix High
Yes,
School.
yeah.
So we knew everybody in the whole
Right.
city of Hampton. But
But Washington.
yeah, when I came to Washington, it was like, I was in a segregated. The school was segregated, but not segregated.
Yes.
I taught at Thompson first, which was a high right there in Chinatown. We had a lot of children came from Chinatown at that time. So I was, I got involved with that, but it wasn't the white children that came there.
Was that
And it was what I came from in Hampton. Hampton had all black kids, and and then when I moved to Arlington, I applied and got in Head Start, and I taught in Head Start for 6 years. I think
you
it was
went
about
to
6 years.
Arlington?
Yeah, I moved. Yeah, we moved from D.C.
To
We were living
Arlington.
down H Street,
Mm-hmm.
and then we moved to Arlington, Virginia. I had an aunt and uncle that lived in Arlington, and so they found us a place. So it
What
was
was
nice.
Arlington like?
Arlington, segregated. When I got, when I first came here, I even picketed the Glebe Theater on, at that time it was Glebe Theater right at Lee Highway and Glebe Road. There was a theater right in there. It's changed now, that area. But
And
I
what
did
was it?
picketed
You
that.
picketed.
Yeah,
What were you picketing about?
integrating the theater.
Integrating the theater. Okay.
See, theaters.
Yeah.
Arlington was very segregated. Our community, I lived in an area of North Arlington. It was called Halls Hill,
Okay.
and they even had a wall at the end of the neighborhood to separate the black people from the white people in Arlington at that time. Now you're talking about 60. Cindy was born in 60. That was about 1968, about 68, and they had a wall to actually separate the white. They've taken that wall now and let the street go through. They stopped the street. They blocked the street. The wall went behind and the street was blocked off.
what was the
They've
street?
opened it now
Yeah.
because I have a cousin that lives over there, so I kind of.
What's the street?
The street is Cameron.
Cameron. So there was a wall.
Yeah, but
Separated.
yeah, there was a wall.
Yeah.
At the end of the street went down, and then you couldn't go out of this neighborhood to go on down to Boston. The street curved and came back up into the neighborhood. You had to go to get out of the
So you
neighborhood.
don't- yeah.
You
Yeah.
always had to go down Lee Highway
Mm.
because the other streets didn't go through.
Interesting.
We took Lee Highway out
And
of
the
it.
picketing. Tell me about how many of you went to that?
Oh, my aunt. There's
Okay.
now a school named after my aunt. It's my aunt by marriage, but it's called Dorothy Ham. It's on the internet, Dorothy Ham Middle School.
In
It's
Alexandria.
in Arlington.
Arlington.
Yeah,
Ah,
it's a
okay.
school named after her because she and her family, they were very much involved in civil rights up here. My father, we were involved down there because my father worked with the NAACP. So I had a lot of background into segregation and what he was fighting for. And he was going into conventions and he'd come back and share what he did at the conventions. And he was always fighting for equal rights through the NAACP. So I kind of got involved in it. So when I got, I don't know whether you're ready for this part, but when I got arrested in Petersburg, that's interesting. I would tell my father, I would tell my parents that I was going, that we were going to integrate the library. We were going to sit in the white section of the library.
So no, you need to tell this story. You need to.
That's another.
No,
yeah.
no. Let's.
I don't know whether you're at that point. That's why I
No,
kind
no,
of
but
stopped.
this is important. So, so you picketed in Alexandria at the theater,
Yeah, the theater. Yeah,
and
that was with my aunt
okay,
and some other people. There were white people that were on the picket line.
that were also on the picket.
White. That
And
were
did
on
it
the.
change things eventually, or?
Yeah, the theater did in
It
Arlington
did.
eventually
Do you know
change.
when, roughly?
I don't know because I moved out
You
of.
moved out. Okay.
I moved out of Arlington Head Start because I got a job in. Where did I go from there? I got a job back in D.C.
I see.
because the salary was quite a bit
Better.
more. So we decided to move, and he was working. My husband was working in D.C. So we decided to move back to D.C. because we both were here in this area rather than commuting from Arlington, which we had done for 6 years.
And when you came back to DC, did you teach again?
Yeah,
You
I got a
did.
teaching job.
Okay.
I said it paid more money
Yeah.
than the Arlington
Then the
Head Start. I was with
Arlington was
Head Start. Yeah, I went to Head Start program,
Okay.
and then they began to cut funds. Holland, it was good fun, good money when I moved out there to work for. Then they cut Head Start, and Head Start started getting cut. So I came back to
And so what year would you have come back to DC?
1970. Well, I didn't live in the city. I didn't come back to live in the
Oh,
city.
okay,
I lived in Prince George's County.
Oh,
In 1970, I moved
Where?
there. Off of New Hampshire Avenue.
okay.
Up there.
Yes, yes.
Not that far off the line, from
yeah.
the line,
So the
northeast.
incidents with the library and you being arrested, what is
Oh,
that?
yeah, I
What
was
is that
in,
story? What,
yeah, I was in school.
yeah.
Girlfriend and I did finish high school. We both went to Virginia State. We were friends and all. And she was from a larger family, so she worked. I didn't work while I was in school, but she had a job with working in the church, secretary for the pastor, because she was in. Her major was secretarial work, so she got the job at the church. And this pastor, Reverend Wyatt T. Walker, he's very famous. He went to jail with Martin Luther King many times. You'll see him in lots and lots of pictures. I have of them together, loads
And
of
his name
pictures.
again?
Wyatt, W-Y-A-T-T-T,
Yes.
Walker.
Okay.
Same last name that I had. My maiden name was Walker. And so she was working for them, and he was upset. Well, it was segregation there. He was from New Jersey. He'd come down. He was a young pastor. I guess he was in his 20s then. He was older than we were, but not that much. So he didn't like the segregation or anything. So he decided, especially the library, because his children could not go to the library. He had young children, like 4, 6, 9-year-old. So he had 4 children, and they could not go into the library there in Petersburg. There was no library for whites. I mean for blacks. Even during my time, there was not a library for blacks. We only used the school library. So There was no library.
Petersburg, we're talking Petersburg.
Virginia.
Virginia again.
Virginia again, segregated HBCU school. Yeah. So he could not.
So the library.
So he was a library.
Part of the white neighborhood.
It was sitting in.
Where was it?
I can't really remember
Okay.
the streets
But it was
were on.
segregated.
You could probably Google that and find out what street it was on, but it was the library for whites to go in and check out books. It was for blacks to go down to the basement, knowing the book that you want, and they had a card catalog down there, because I did go down there to check it out. But so you had to tell them the name of the book, and then there would be a librarian or lady there that would call upstairs, and they would send the book down on a elevator or something, a little cart, that little cart to bring the book down that you wanted. And that's the book. So there was no opportunity for the blacks in Petersburg to have any library use. The college students did, because we had a library on the campus. So I was able to use, campus library. So it really didn't involve me that much, because I used the campus library. So, but the people in the city didn't have one. So Reverend Wyatt T. Walker was very upset about this, and so he decided to organize to integrate the library. But he couldn't get any of the blacks that lived in town, the town people, to do it. So he reached out to his friend that was his secretary that was on the campus. So that's how she brought me in and said, hey, Reverend Walker's going to do this library to sit in at the library. And she had a couple of male friends. So it was a lot of students from the college. Not a lot, it was 9 of us, I think. 7 of us, something like 7 in all. We got 2 high school kids from the high school in town that went. There was only one person that was a citizen, a real voting citizen of Petersburg that was with the group. And the rest of them didn't want to do it. They were scared. Jobs. They had domestic jobs. They worked for white people. They were actually afraid that they were going to lose their job or not get promotion.
And of the 7, one of you was voting age.
We were voting age, but we didn't vote in Petersburg. I voted at home.
You didn't vote, yes, okay.
I went home. I used to pay poll tax and go home.
Yes,
We had to pay poll tax. My parents made sure that the poll tax was always paid for my brother and I.
Could you explain poll tax for those who may not know?
Huh?
Could you
Oh, what is poll tax? Poll tax was a fee you had to pay to vote. You could not vote. At that time, it didn't seem like a lot. It might have been $3 or $5, something like that, according to the time period. But we had to pay that money, and if you didn't pay, and you get a receipt that you had paid your poll taxes, then you can go and vote. But if you hadn't paid that fee, which some of my friends had not, because their parents were not as active as my father was, and money-wise too. That was a lot of money. You got 3 or 4 children. So they didn't vote. So my father made sure he paid my brothers and my poll taxes so we could vote as long as we were in Virginia. As long as we lived in Virginia. And so in Petersburg, we did not register to vote there. My girlfriend and I were still registered in Hampton. It wasn't a thing where you went to school, that's where you vote.
Sure.
No, at that time you didn't.
Yeah.
You were registered to vote in your hometown.
Okay, so they convinced 7 of you to go and demonstrate at this theater.
Yeah, at the
Library.
library. Yeah, so we walked from Reverend Walker's house, nice to walk, maybe a couple of miles, trying not to be noticed as it was a small group really. We walked to the library, and we walked inside the library, and we sat down, and the librarian came over and told us we had to leave the library. So we still sat, kept reading, kept our heads down, and paying mind. So she waited a while, and after a while she called the police. And so when the police chief came, he asked us to leave the library. The library was for white only, and we were to leave. And so we still sat. And then he says, you're under arrest. And so at that point, he said, get up, you're under arrest. So we did. We did, they asked us that time. And so we went to jail, and I actually stayed in jail about 5 hours, 3 or 4 hours or so. I couldn't stay all night because I was a student on the campus, and every night at that time, being a student in 1960, you couldn't be out and around after dark. You had to better check into your dormitory. So we were very conscious that we had to get, it was only 2 females, the others were males. The males could do it, they could stay off, but the females could not stay off. So my girlfriend and I were the only 2 females from the college. So we had to get back. But it had already been arranged. We practiced how this demonstration would go before it started. Before it happened, what would happen. We didn't know exactly what they would say and whatever, but we had bail money, we had an attorney, all of that was in place. So after being in jail for a few hours, of them bringing us dinner, and it was some kind of stew or something. I was like, no. My girlfriend, I was like, no. And in the cell, no toilet seat on the toilet. And I could say, oh, we can hardly wait for them to get the legal work done so we could get out of here, get back to school. So we did that. So after I got back, I called my parents because I figured it'd hit on the news. So I was like, okay. They would hear it. So she had to call her parents, and I called my parents and told them what had happened. And so it had to go all the way through Richmond. They went through the court system, all the way from that court to the next court. And finally, in late summer, it was dismissed. But it had to go through several courts before the process of doing the library.
What was your parents' reaction?
They were like, "Oh, you did?"
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
They were fine with it. Yeah, they were proud of it. They were not upset at all. It was like, okay, you did what you wanted to do, and they felt
Was
like
that
a
the
hammer.
only time you did something like this?
I have picketed in Arlington when I was in college. We took a group of kids. We went to Richmond, Virginia, and we picketed Tallhammer's. There was a store that was called Tallhammer's, like Macy's department store, and they had restaurants in there and so forth that were segregated. So we picketed Tallhammer's department store. So that was the only time that I had done any picketing.
Were you arrested?
No, we were not arrested. No, we just picketed and then left there. And it was a wonderful experience. While I was in college, I was able to go down to Shaw University, and that's where that was the first time I met John Lewis there. He was a student, and he had come from his college.
Charlotte University.
Shaw.
Shaw University.
That's in Charlotte. I think it's in Charlotte.
Okay.
Anyway, during the spring break, that's when the student nonviolence was formed by kids coming from a lot of different schools.
John Lewis was there.
Huh?
John Lewis.
Yeah, John Lewis was there. Martin Luther King came.
Yes. It was
And
John Lewis.
He organized the student.
Yes.
He was organizing the students there at Shaw. We were organized to go back to our own areas, and after that, do things. Because, believe it or not, our school was the first school that the library, I think, was about the first place that in Virginia that had been picketed. It had a sit-in, the library in Petersburg.
So this was something that John Lewis, was it part of Dr. King's plan as well?
No, I
Or
think
was it
John
just
Lewis.
John
Lewis, but Dr. King came. I think it might have been a coordinated plan.
Okay. But
That
he would
they needed
have,
to get students,
Right.
because by that time Greensboro had happened,
Mm-hmm.
the sit-ins in Greensboro. So students all over the country were beginning to
Okay.
do things as a
What
student.
happened in
And so
Greensboro?
Greensboro were the sit-ins at the lunch counters.
Okay.
So if you ever go to the National Museum here, Afro,
Yeah.
they have that lunch
Yes.
the place where people sit down.
Mhm.
That's kind of
That's
representing
Greensboro.
Greensboro.
Okay.
That's Greensboro, North Carolina.
Okay. So there were a lot of activities in terms of demonstrations and pickets and things like that going on.
Yes.
Okay. And John Lewis then would have, he would set
He was
up
trying to
meetings
coordinate
and
and-
try to coordinate.
And we sang songs. We did a lot of
Yes.
singing of songs and all like that, freedom songs.
And it was
And
a
we taught
training,
each other. It was a
wasn't it?
training.
Yeah, training.
John Lewis
Yes.
trained us,
Yes.
was training us at
Mm.
Shaw University. That's where
Right.
that training took
And
place.
it was this nonviolence.
It was a
that
nonviolent.
being
We were taught
promoted, right?
somebody spit on you, you just got to turn around and
Exactly.
keep walking the other way. You know, somebody say some ugly words, you just act like you don't hear them. And we also, see, I had also done training with Reverend Walker because we used to go to his house on Saturday before we did the sit-in at the library. He trained us
And who's
how to
Reverend Walker?
ignore,
Who's-
how to keep focus
Training.
to what you had to do, and don't be
Who was-
distracted by
who was
words.
Mr. Marvin Walker?
Wyatt T. Walker.
White
T. Walker. I say we had training there also.
Okay, I see.
So I had done some training before I went to Greensboro.
Mhm.
I mean to Shaw University, Shaw, because Greensboro was the sit-in before I went down to Shaw. But Shaw brought students from other schools that had not had any particular demonstrations or any training and how to, as students, how to respond to the
Yeah.
turnover, integrating of schools. How do you act? What do you
Yes,
do? What do
yeah.
you say?
Because they got
What's gonna
pretty
happen?
ugly, those.
Yeah, they were pretty ugly.
Pretty
Yeah,
ugly, I mean-
they were pretty ugly. Yeah, you had to grit your teeth and kind of.
Because people were yelling things at you.
Yeah, they
and-
sell the marks, and you didn't say anything. You just
Yeah.
kept your mouth closed, and you didn't look at them. You didn't give them any eye contact to make them. You just kept on your straight path of where you were going, and that was it. But they organized how to. They were prepared. They prepared us by having attorneys ready, especially for students to be bailed out, so they would not have to miss school.
Mm.
So that was already in place that black attorneys would be there and ready to bail us out as soon as we got in. We definitely had to be bailed out. Because we would have been put out of school. You couldn't be out of. The guys stayed over 3 or 4 days that were arrested.
For the training.
No, I was
No,
saying
for
when
the-
we were arrested
Oh,
in
you-
the
I see, in the
library.
Yes.
They stayed
Oh,
over
I
in
see.
jail,
For
but
3 or 4
but
days.
the two of us females, we had to come out,
Right, yeah.
go to school. If we were on campus, we could be expelled from school, and that was the whole thing. Now that would have made my parents really angry. Had I been expelled from school, they would have said, "Wait a minute, we paid for your tuition." So I knew that we were going to be out.
Yeah.
So that was a comforting.
So when you got this training, did you get involved in other demonstrations?
No, I didn't, because from there, that lasted the last summer, I transferred to Norfolk.
Mm.
And when I transferred to Norfolk, things were a little different in Hampton, even from kids that I met when I went to college. Like a good friend of mine now, I've got to call her, a Patsy Cobbs. She was a part of the schools that were closed in Prince William County, that they closed the schools rather than integrate them. And she told me about several of her friends that, especially males, ended their school, could not finish school because they shut the schools down. But she was fortunate because she had relatives that lived in another city, and she went to live with her relatives, and so she was able to finish high school. But the students that did not have, didn't finish because there are the white children did because they opened private schools for white children only, with white, rich people that had money. They opened the schools, but only white kids would go there. But they shut down the public schools totally, and only white children could go to school. And then they didn't leave any of them open in Prince. I think
In where was
they
this?
closed it.
Do you,
Prince. what
was it in Virginia?
Yeah, in Virginia. This is Virginia.
Oh,
And so the stories I got out of Virginia when I went to college was different from the stories that I had heard, because I'd always had a good feeling. My daddy always gave me a good feeling of, he grew up, in that white environment. And then he joined a Catholic church that was, integrated, it was an integrated church. Catholic churches were the only only churches down there, not schools, churches that were integrated. So I always had a good feeling, and even to this, not to this day, but some days when I first got it, people said, they would talk about white people. Black people have prejudice too. And they would talk about white people. They like white people. And I just never had that same feeling, and still don't have it. I guess because my daddy, although he worked with NAACP, we kept a relationship with that white family, and they had children. So my daddy was involved. He didn't go to school or anything with them, but he was involved with conversations and, play little games and this kind of thing. So the segregation in Hampton was so different from segregation in the other rural parts or other parts of Virginia. Virginia is so different in different areas. Even now they are, the voting and everything else. You'll find that one area of Virginia votes completely different from the other area of Virginia.
So then you came back to Washington, D.C. again. You had moved
Yep.
to Arlington.
Yeah.
But then came back.
Yep.
To D.C.
I moved to Arlington. I came back to Prince George's County.
Prince George's County. That's
Yeah,
right. That's
yeah.
right.
Because we found, number one, Washington was so ghetto. And we could afford to live on our teacher's salary, and he had made a big grade, so we didn't have a lot of money. He was in the lower grades there. We couldn't afford to live, in some of the other places. So when we chose to live, we said, well, Prince George's County, we get the best house for the best price.
Okay.
We were looking at price. And so that's why we moved over, because we didn't want to live in the ghetto again. We had been in the ghetto, and we moved to Arlington. We moved in a segregated community, but it wasn't ghetto. It was more of a mixed community. It was just a black community with people that did it, doctors, electricians,
And when you
almost
say
everybody.
ghetto, what are you referring to
Ghetto to us,
in that context?
in my context, means there are people that hang out on the street, all kind of language. The alcohol is going crazy. You're people that don't respect young children. They'll say all kind of curse words in front of a kid as they would adults. The respect level is not there at all. They live differently in terms of trashing areas and not picking up their trash and all like that. So when we speak, or some people speak of ghetto, that's what they spoke about. And when I came to Washington, I was not used to the ghetto mentality that I found on H Street at that time.
Okay.
That was a really a shock to me. I was like, oh. It was a
So then you moved to Prince George's County,
Yeah.
New Hampshire Street
Yeah, New Hampshire Avenue.
going all the way.
And Riggs Road, it runs between the street I lived on, between that, running out towards Adelphi.
Okay, I see.
Going towards Adelphi.
And what was that like?
That community, integrated community. There was a majority of blacks, but it wasn't integrated. People next door to me used to take care of my son. He was in half-day kindergarten, and when she picked up her child, pick up. So that was different. Arlington was segregated. My daughter entered kindergarten the year that Arlington tried to integrate it, and bus children. That was in 19. Let's see, she was born in 63, 5. That must have been about 68. And I went to school, and I took some classes, extension classes from University of Virginia that was in Arlington. So I met some really nice people over there that we got to be close to in family. So my children got to see the integration there, where they did not see it in that neighborhood at all. Not in Hallsville and Arlington. North knew number of black children. That was it. Black people, completely. My friends, everybody in there was African American. Yeah, and so they got to see it there. Plus my little white girl that was in Cindy's class. They went to kindergarten together.
Cindy is your daughter?
My daughter, Cindy, and she was in this class, and then after that we moved to Prince George's County. So she got disconnected from this little girl that came to her little parties and came over to visit, and she went to visit. But about 8 years ago, my daughter was working for D.C. Bar at that time. She's HR, and she had put a job out or something was there. And this girl from Arlington, which was a lady, you're talking about, they were 50 years old then, about 50, saw her name come up, because she wasn't married, and her name came up on the sheet, and so she called her and asked her, was she the same Cynthia Howell that lived in Arlington in 1960, in the late 60s in Arlington? And Cindy said, yes, I am. And so they got reconnected, and they're like this now. Even I am. I've talked to the mother, and the mother's gone somewhere. So we have reconnected, and they visited each other, and they've come to the party. And my son, of course, he didn't go to HBCU school. My daughter went to Hampton. My son went to University of Virginia in Charlottesville. And so he married a white girl, and they live out there. And so they have one biracial child. And so I was very good friends with there. So we have always maintained, with my children, tried to maintain as much as possible an integrated kind of, everybody's important.
Yes.
Everybody's
I understand.
important.
Yes.
We don't just have to stick to our group when we go somewhere. There are people that are blacks that will not go beyond being with black people all the time. That's it. And but I had it kind of growing up, and then my children got some of it through friendship and relationships. And when I was at University of Virginia, extension courses in Arlington, I met this lady. She had 3 children. Her children were around the same age as my children, and we were she's deceased now. But you're talking about buddies. We shared everything, and I still miss her to this day, and I do interact with her. Her children are one is in Kentucky, Louisville, the other one's in London, and the other one's in Portland. So I do get pictures and communicate with them from time to time, but we were very good friends. But my children did not keep the friendship with them. I guess because when we moved to Prince George's County, they lost all that and developed new friendship. Yeah. And the new friendships coming to Prince George's County was a segregated kind of thing, because Prince George's County at that time was just trying to start busing across lines. So my daughter, instead of going to the high school in our neighborhood that was closest to us, Northwestern. She was bused to High Point High School, which is
how
about
far?
High Point is on
Roughly how many?
Delphi Road. What is it? Delphi. Um, Delphi Road. So she was bused from where we lived on New Hampshire, close to the district really line. They started busing to integrate the schools at that time. And
What was that like?
huh?
What was that period like when
What?
they started the busing?
The busing.
Yeah,
Well, I didn't really live through it
yeah,
because I was
No.
strictly segregated.
yeah.
The busing was interesting because they still, it was so segregated. It was still clannish because she didn't come out of, she went to that
This is your
school
daughter.
the whole time, my daughter
Your
said.
daughter, yeah.
Yeah. She didn't come out of there with any white friends at all. She came out, all her friends were black. She came out of that period. And when she got out of High Point, she wanted to go to HBCU school. She wanted it so bad. She was like, the white people didn't treat her nice. She didn't really feel a part of the school. She was bused there, and she never got to feel a part of that school. Now, my son went to St. John's over on Military Road
Private?
High School. Yeah, Catholic High School, St. John's High School right here. It's military and something
Yes,
over near
I
the
think,
park.
yes.
You might have passed it. When he finished it, because he went to University of Virginia, he had a whole different perspective of a white, he has white friends, Uh,
Yeah.
he has white friends. A couple of the
But
kids.
he
When he
had
got
it-
married, a couple of his friends were white. They were ushers or something in the way,
Yes, yes.
So
But he had a different experience. than
yeah,
your
but he had
daughter,
a different
right?
experience. That's what I'm
He
saying. The
wasn't
experience.
bused. Yeah.
The experience is so important to make things happen, and so often we don't try to realize that those experiences are so important, social experiences and all like that. Because I did give my children social experience, and it's just that my daughter went to High Point and she didn't have such a great experience there. It was like,
And then your daughter went to college.
yeah, she went to Hampton University where her grandfather finished.
Oh,
She
nice.
went down there to finish HBCU school. Yeah, she was like, oh man, I don't want to school again like High Point. I do not want to go to school again like High Point. She never felt a real part of that school or that. I don't know whether they did. I don't know. They didn't do a lot to involve the black children that were coming from my area. My area was integrated, but they weren't many. So the majority were black kids, and they were pushing black kids over to High Point because High Point was all white, just about, all white school. It wasn't segregation, but because of neighborhood,
Yes.
it was an all black school. So, and they didn't do very much to integrate the school with far as dancing and culture and all like that. So she never felt really part of it. My son went to St. John's and he had a whole different feeling. School
But
was
you
different.
also said your daughter was mistreated. She had a hard time.
We have, well, not really mistreated, but not treated well. Because, nobody actually hit her or she never involved in any of that.
Sure.
But you could feel the vibes of not being wanted or not being included, not being a part of, not encouraged to join. And so she felt that she needed to be somewhere that she could feel wanted, involved, encouraged. My son didn't feel that at all. He was like, oh yeah, I'm St. John's, I've been there. When he went there, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade, about 6 years there. So he was ready to go to University of Virginia. It was fine with him. He picked that.
And then, what did you do from
I was,
then on?
what was I doing?
Yeah, you
Teaching.
were teaching, right?
Yeah, I taught school. Yeah.
And how was that? You enjoyed
Teaching
it?
school. Yeah, I enjoyed.
You enjoyed
I
it?
just retired from COVID. Well, I retired before COVID from DC Public Schools. I'd retired in 2000. And then a friend of mine was a principal, and I went back for 2 more years. And then after that, I decided to sign up to substitute. So I said, I don't want to be going all over the place. I want to go to schools. I did the schools in Montgomery County that were close to home, so I wouldn't have the traffic and gas and all that. So I did that all the way to the COVID. When the schools closed
I see.
for COVID, that was the end. I had taught all the way,
Oh my
the whole
goodness,
time,
yeah.
the whole time.
And
That's
so you must have moved.
till I was 80, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. You must have moved to another school.
I moved to
district?
Montgomery. Well, I moved to Montgomery County.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, I moved out of Prince George's, moved to Montgomery.
Okay.
And in Montgomery County, I started going to schools that were closer to me in
Nice.
Montgomery County. Yeah.
Very nice. And elementary school is what you.
Elementary,
taught.
yeah, that's my major, that's my background in elementary.
And so, where your children are now? Do they live?
One is lives in D.C. She's living at 8th and H.
Oh, you're
Believe it or not, she lives 2 blocks on 8th Street off H.
Okay. Interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
My son, he's in Fairfax.
In Fairfax. Okay.
So they got their
Two
own.
different experiences.
Yeah, she's married now, so she and her husband live there. She doesn't have children, but she likes living in the city. She had lived in Arlington. She lived in PG County, in Montgomery County for a short time in Montgomery County, but mostly in Arlington and PG were her 2 places.
What's Montgomery County like?
Uh,
How
it's fine. I don't have any. I'm older now. I don't have children that are involved in the school systems and all like that. So I don't run into any problems. I don't run any problems in Montgomery County.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell us? Has other stories been sparked in your head, or anything that comes to mind?
No, I guess a big highlight point also was when they did a play in Petersburg. It ran about 2 months on the story, my life story. Someone played my part, so I got to go down to Petersburg and see us go through we told the story to report, to what you call it, whoever, and they did the story, and they hired, actresses and actors to play our parts, and
So
it was a beautiful
let's
play.
take a slow. You then moved to Montgomery County, you said.
Yes, I divorced. My husband and I got a
And you
divorce,
continued teaching.
and I moved to Montgomery County.
Yes, and that's where you retired.
From where?
From
I retired more than, I stopped teaching.
From
I
teaching.
actually retired from the job in 2000.
Okay.
That was my actual retirement day. I retired when I turned 60. When I turned 60, I retired.
Okay.
And then my friend asked me, that's a principal, asked me would I come and teach full time until she found a teacher. So I went and taught 2 more years full time. And then I retired completely.
I see.
And I became a substitute. I put my name on the substitute list in Montgomery County.
Yes.
And so I started being a substitute, and I was like working every day. But I enjoyed it.
Sure.
It was different. I got to meet more people. I got to be involved with more children. I had Montgomery has more of a mixture of students, white, all races, all kinds, all immigrations, so different families and all like that. So it was different being in Montgomery County where I am, because I'm right at the edge. I'm off Flower and Piney Branch, so I'm just over the line a little bit. So I like the involvement
Nice.
of different students.
But you were in Washington, D.C. or surroundings at a very historical time in the 60s.
Yes.
And so I wondered, like, the March on Washington, I mean,
Oh, when the March on Washington occurred, I was actually, yeah, I was in, what was that, 19, what, 68?
68, I think.
68. I was trying to say, had I moved to Virginia then. No, I was living in Washington off of Benning Road in Benning Heights area. And the March on Washington, I had an aunt, you know, I tell you I have relatives in Arlington. So I went to Arlington and rode a bus. I left my baby, my grandmother had come up here. They were visiting too. She had come from Hampton, up Newport News up here. So I left my baby that I was nursing at that time because she was like 3 months old. Let's see, she was born in June and this march was in August. So she was 3 months old. Well, June, July, August, 2 months old. I was still nursing. So I went to the march. And my parents came up from Hampton. They drove up here, and we took a bus. We all got on a bus that they chartered from Arlington. They chartered several buses from Arlington to go in there. So we went and stayed the whole day. It was a rough day, but I enjoyed it. What was it like? It was just so many people. I was like, wow, all of these people. And they weren't just black people. There was such a mixture of all people all up in the trees and everywhere. They were all over the place. It was just an awesome experience.
What were your
Awesome.
feelings?
Huh?
What was it like for you? What were you feeling that day?
I was feeling that a change after listening to all the speakers and all and so forth, that a real change was going to happen, that things were going to be different than they had been. And everybody was going to have a better life because everybody was going to try to understand each other and accept each other for their differences. And because we're all people. I mean, the skin color is different, but we all on the inside have the same thing. A heart, same kind of heart. If you take it out, you can't tell a black heart from a white heart. You know, if you just lay about it and say which one is black and which one is white, you don't know the difference. You know.
So it must have been a
And
very
so
extraordinary day for you.
it was quite an experience to see that many people congregating together. I didn't expect to see that magnitude at all. I thought it would just be, you know, few people out, and that's it. But it was just tons of people, tons and tons of people.
And would you say in your lifetime, in these extraordinary years that you've lived, basically, I mean, it seems to me like you moved in integrated circles at times. I mean, certainly in Virginia with your father and the white family that you
Yeah.
knew and all that. But either for you or your husband, were there ever difficulties that posed themselves in relation to racial issues?
Racial issues? Yeah, they were sometimes, not all the time. I guess because when I lived in Arlington more so, when we lived, I shouldn't say when we lived in Arlington, I guess I could say there were because I had white friends. You know, I told you I had the white friends and the white kids. And I can remember one incident that they went with me down to Hampton to visit my parents. And so her children, white children, had not really seen a farmer. My daddy was a small farmer, you know, like enough for the family and maybe some to share with the neighbors because he liked that. And we went crabbing and all of those things with these whites. So when it was time to come back, they were to ride back. I think we must have gone down on a train or a bus or something. When it was time to come back, my husband had come down to Hampton, and they wanted to ride, you know, back up to Arlington. He was afraid to bring them in the car with him. I mean, there was some discussion with him, and I said, "Oh, it's going to be okay. It's not going to be any problem, you know." But he did have. He had a fear of carrying them. I wasn't going.
Yes.
They were leaving to go
Right,
back.
right.
And he had a fear of taking my friend Donna. Her name was Donna. He had a fear of Donna being in the car with him, and he was a black man. He had that fear. I said everything. I was surprised that he expressed that fear because I really hadn't thought of it before, that he would be afraid to drive with them back to Arlington. And he was. I think it finally happened that he did take them, but he did express fear about it. He took her, but he expressed fear about it. He wasn't too happy about doing it.
If you were to say something to the younger African Americans today, what would it be?
The young people,
Yes.
that's an interesting question. That's what to think about. It's try to make the most of their life and to don't be, we call it clannish, or don't be so that you think because a person does not have the same skin, that color that you have, that they're not the same on the inside. On the inside, they have the same feelings, they have the same body parts, they have everything you have. It's just that the color on the outside is different. But I don't know. Some people are ready to accept it, and some blacks are still not willing. And we're not willing to accept it because white people don't let us accept it. They really don't. It's even difficult for me now, and I've gone through all these different cycles. It's difficult when I hear them, white people, saying things that really affect black people. When they talk about things about health issues and all like that, it's black people that need it, and they don't want to give it. So it's mostly going to affect black people. So I get upset with that it's going in different. Without them saying black, I can read black into it. I can read black in so much that's going on now that you read it, but don't read it. They don't say the word, and the sign is not up, but it's in their head that I'm going to treat these black people differently because they're black. And that's the only reason I'm going to treat them differently. I'm going to make sure they don't get certain jobs. I'm going to make sure they don't get this. I'm going to make sure they don't get the promotions. I make sure. My daughter just had to file a case against where she used to work on racial discrimination not too long ago. She had to file one. So, it's still going on. It's still going on. It's just that she had kept good notes and good documentation to really prove it. But they don't want to admit that it's going on. They want to say it's not, or they want to say, take all the books out that dealt with black. That's my big issue as an educator, that they want to extract certain books from the shelves. And I feel like, why do you have educators if you got politicians or other people who know nothing about education that want to say what books come out of the schools? If a kid doesn't want to read it, he doesn't want to read it. A kid wants to read it, he wants to read it, And I think to take away I think adults are trying to make, a lot of white adults are trying to make their children segregationists. A lot of white adults with the attitude and their language and their actions are trying to make their children become segregationists without the word written up there. The words are not there, but the action is there. And you can feel the action, Maybe they don't think you can feel it. Some of it you can because things they do, but some of the other things they do, it's just the feeling that they generate from their bodies that make blacks hostile. and things that you may not, just do things to rile up you, to make you angry, to, you know, and build those things that maybe wasn't even in you. And it's harder for the younger people, I guess because I was always in segregation, to walk away from it. But the younger people now are not taught like John Lewis and all that, hey, you just keep your mouth closed, you keep your direction going where you're going, and just ignore the other stuff on the sides and keep going forward. Keep going forward and don't look too much on the sides of what's happening. It's not easy to do, but it's almost, in some ways, you have to do that if you until the world begins to change around again. And the world is not going to change until adults take a more active part with children. Adults have got to take a more active, and adults are not being adults these days. They're not trying to make children understand. Children are not born with it. You've got to develop those habits of loving everybody and doing things with other people. But adults are not teaching that now. Adults are teaching segregation, again, without putting the word up, white and black, but they're teaching it. And
Anything else?
no, I don't have anything else. What do you have on your
And,
agenda?
that was very good. Thank you so
I
much.
Yeah, I hope you got a real feel
Thank you.
of what it is to have gone through this generational thing.
Oh, it's amazing.
You know, I've gone through this generations thing over these years, and I try to tell the story, and the story that my brother really had feelings about when my daddy says that he lived with the Wilsons, he lived with these white people and how good they were to him. They did. My brother's like, what? Well, he's accepted it, but he had a kind of different feel about it that you shouldn't say they're so good. What do you see so good and you were the house, you were the yard boy, and you couldn't eat with them and all like that. But my daddy looked at it, and he always said until the time my dad died at 96 years old, and his mind, he never had dementia. But before he passed, he always said that the Wilsons, that's what the names were good to him. He always said they were good to him. And I understand very much, what he meant by they were very good to him. My brother said, how can you say they were good to you and you were the houseboy,
But that makes sense.
Yeah.
What your brother,
Yeah.
it makes sense.
Yeah. And so
It was
people are
still
people. People are people.
Yeah.
And we can't forget that. And we can't forget to teach younger kids. That's why I've stayed in education. Like I told you, I was substituting until I was 80. I thought I had something to the video that you watch, the YouTube video. I showed that many times in classes, and when I go teach in the elementary school, one principal he had an assembly. So all the kids, I would just show it to the class I was substituting in, but this principal had an assembly where all the classes could see it, So, but the interesting part, when you're going through history, you don't realize that these things are going to be history one day. You don't realize that, you just look at, oh, this just happened. It just happened. But then we look at it again and say, I was really a part of history. And you are a part of history. It's just going to be at a different time than it is then.
Yeah. No, it's very interesting.
And what'd you say?
Please, no, I'm just saying it's really, everyone has a history, I agree with you. But the times in which you lived were really quite historical in general, more so than maybe other times.
I don't know. This is a history. Right now, it's history going on too.
Yeah, right now, I agree. we
Yeah.
are in another moment like that.
Yeah,
But,
we're
but
going
I
through
think
a
the
real.
60s were also an interesting.
Oh yeah, it was.
That's all I mean.
Yeah,
It's a very,
yeah. It was very
and
interesting.
the period just before the 60s in terms of race
Yeah.
relations in this country, but then what happened with the 60s was also interesting.
Yeah.
And again, the
And I didn't think at that time that anything would ever change. I thought at that time we would always sit in the back of the bus. If you got on the city bus, you sat in the back of the bus. And that was my life, of sitting in the back of the bus. So when they integrated, and boy, you could sit anywhere, I was like, oh, I can finally sit anywhere on the bus. You can go to a restaurant and eat. You used to couldn't go to a restaurant and eat. So those things change. So for the period that we're in now, hopefully it will change. We're in another period, and hopefully this period will settle down like the other period, because the anger was really out there then too. It was extreme anger. Anger was just all over the place. And so this is what I see now. I see, a little different, but it's anger. When you boil it down, what's going on? Anger. What's going on in the 60s? Anger. Anger. And
there's
for
a
the
reason for the
yeah, I lived through anger. Maybe not some of the people that I know, but I lived through anger.